Next, I'd like to introduce our new member, Felicia Lampion. She's going to lead some discussion, question, and answer session for us. So, Felicia, you're up next.
Thank you so very much. Good afternoon to all my fellow Toastmaster colleagues and guests. Thank you so very much, Michael Franklin, for sharing. Thank you for serving as that beacon of hope and bridging the gap for the next generation to come. I really enjoyed your speech. At this time, we'll have our question and answering session. If you have a question, will you please raise your hand and be identified at this time? Daniel Webster Jr., you have the mic. No, I'm sorry. Friedman. Margaret Friedman, you have the mic.
I'm new. Do we just put it in chat or do we actually speak?
You can speak.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I want to thank Carol for inviting Michael. That was just gave me so much energy to just feel Michael's spirit coming through so powerfully and so putting me on a high for Friday afternoon. Michael, I formed a group called Progressive Communicators of Washington, D.C., which is just social media people, media relations people, some speechwriters, et cetera. We have about 2,000 members, and it's all just free and networking and stuff. And so I understand the power of groups and like-minded groups. The question I want to ask you is, you have such a powerful spirit and powerful presence and personality. And when you write for someone else, you're getting into their head, you're ghostwriting, you're becoming them, right? So I wondered if you could give us some tips for ghostwriting and getting the voice of your speaker. Thank you.
Absolutely. And first, I definitely want to learn more about your group that you've established, because I think building community is so important. So outside of this call, definitely want to find some time to connect, just to learn and see what ways we can get involved, collaborate, because that's what it's about. Like, you got to be a different type to get into communications work too. So I totally understand. In terms of some advice for ghostwriting and helping get inside the head of a principal, I always say that you really want to get to know who you're working with personally. You want to go beyond just the typical communications questions of who's the audience for this speech, what do you want to say, but rather you want to understand what makes your principal tick. So you want to learn about those formative background stories, like what helped shape them as the leader or the principal that they are today. What's the time that they failed and they learned something from it? And these are always some of the fundamental formative questions I love to ask principals when I first meet them, because then I can jot those down and have my own story bank. And then they'll be shocked when I mention one of those stories they mentioned in a draft for a speech. And they're like, oh, like, I completely forgot I told you that. But yeah, I would have thought of that. That fits perfect telling the story right here. And once you have a good story bank, you can just keep going to the well. And so I always encourage to push and to just fight with folks to really be able to have an opportunity to have that FaceTime with your principal, to get that advice and that information early on when you first start working with the principal too.
Thank you so very much. I'll remember that. Continue to go to the well. Our next question will come from our president, Carol.
Thank you, Felicia. And Michael, thank you so much for an amazing, thoughtful, thought-provoking speech about your journey. Do you think speechwriters can do a good job if they don't give speeches themselves?
I do. And like, I'm one of the rare ones in terms of a speechwriter that has experience giving speeches. And so it gives me a different opportunity to provide some of that direct coaching input. But I think folks that don't give speeches can provide that insight, just because all it takes is a lot of good studying and research and getting to know some of those broader communications tactics and strategies. But I will say I'm a bit biased in thinking if you have that speaking experience, then it gives you a little bit of a leg up, because you have the opportunity to really help folks with the delivery. And for me, I'm always able to work with principals, or I'll add notes in drafts where it's like, this is where you should pause for applause. You should emphasize saying this word or this line because it'll have a special impact. And trust trust me because I speak, I know like where you need to emphasize that too. And so it helps provide good advice, but I think nonetheless, you can definitely still help folks out and be a great speechwriter, even without the public speaking experience.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. Our next question will come from another great speaker that I know very well, Daniel Webster Jr. Please go ahead.
I can't hear you, Daniel.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you guys didn't hear that opening there. So Michael, the question I have for you is, in the Deep South, we're known for leading the nation in football and other athletic types of activities. It's something that I recognized a long time ago is that we're not leading the nation when it comes to speaking, public speaking, oratory skills. What I've been toying with for some time is starting a debate league in the Mississippi Delta. I like the fact that you shared with us how your debate experience kind of led you into the public speaking space. Do you have any advice that you can share with Felicia and I as we move forward toward establishing some type of debate league down in Deep South Mississippi?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of really good debate infrastructure for like the high school and middle school spaces. So I recommend reaching out to the National Association of Urban Debate Leagues because they do a lot of work in helping set up leagues for schools that might not have the funding. And they also tend to have a strong alumni base of volunteer coaches who will be a part of it. I'd also recommend reaching out to the National HBCU Speech and Debate League because there's likely a lot of colleges and HBCUs that would be willing to support local high schools and building up debate leagues too. And then the National Speech and Debate Association is the larger national speech and debate association for middle and high schoolers. And they've been growing a lot, especially as they've continued their efforts for expanding leagues and competition opportunities for students. And also I have a good friend who was a debate partner of mine my freshman year at Howard, who's from Mississippi actually, and was hoping to like work, I believe it was in Jackson and like with the Board of Education to like help establish some debate leagues. So I think she actually works in the Senate now too, ironically enough. So definitely we'll have to connect y'all and like just see like what y'all can do, what y'all can cook up for some fun stuff. And of course, I'm happy to be a resource along the way too.
Thank you so very much for sharing that very helpful information. Our last question will come from Elisa. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Michael, for a really great, inspiring speech. Kind of thinking back to the first speech we had today about the judge, the general, and the congressman, I was wondering if you had advice about sort of how to write for and coach different personality types for a speech. So do you kind of, to what extent do you sort of go with their natural, like predominant style, and to what extent do you try to like work with them to pull out some of that sort of genuine connection? How much is like just general good speaking, and how much is kind of like, bringing out what people may not be using as strongly in their speaking. Thanks.
Oh yeah. So I definitely think like a part of the authenticity is just going with someone's natural speaking style, and by being able to help massage that and help them really become comfortable in their own skin. Like for me, I'm always going to like have some jokes, a little bit of shorthand, a little bit of AAVE too, because I'm not big on like always being super stuffy, super formal. And so you want to really work with your principal to see what they're really comfortable with, what helps make your speaker. And so by being able to help build those is some of the strongest skills that can really help out and showing authenticity, because you don't want to try and mold them into something they're not. And by being able to really help them go in on who they are as a speaker and some of the things they like to say, then it will resonate with an audience where it's like, oh, this is them. Like, this is what they like to say. This is how they say it. And like, it's not someone just pulling the strings behind them a little too much. Though, of course, as a good speechwriter, you hope that you're able to be a thought partner and like actually work with them and be able to pitch ideas back and forth with them rather than just being a scribe and just writing down whatever they're saying.
Thank you so very much, Michael Franklin, for sharing. We've really enjoyed those amazing questions. At this time, this is the end of our question and answer session.